Join us, Alix
and Colleen,
self-proclaimed fake it till you make it experts as we navigate the highs and lows of being a woman and how the pressure and overwhelm of trying to do it all often leads to feeling like an imposter in our own lives.
In today's episode, having both been recently diagnosed, Colleen and I explore the link between ADHD and imposter syndrome, a narrative that often comes up in our conversations with guests and each other.
Hi, Alix.
Hi, Colleen.
We are going to have a very interesting, I think, conversation today.
Yes.
Because it's going to be just you and I. We don't have a guest here right now. And we're going to talk about
ADHD and imposter syndrome.
Yes.
I wonder if we'll be able to stay on task.
I don't know.
It's getting to be about 3, or my meds are going to wear off soon.
Crash time. So this is just one more thing that Alix and I have in common.
Yes. And 80% of the population.
And a whole lot of other people. That's right. So my diagnosis is new.
So is mine.
Yeah. So we're both kind of maneuvering through this together. So first of all, Alix, I'm really curious, although I know, but why don't you tell our viewers, our listeners, how you felt about the diagnosis?
I was actually kind of surprised, and I still sort of am maybe surprised, although I'm feeling much better and more focused since I've started taking medication. So clearly it's legit, although for a while I really wasn't sure. I had never really thought about it that much because I am a slightly organized person in some ways. But my son was diagnosed a couple of years ago, and as a result of that, I started to consume a lot of content about ADHD just so I could understand how to parent better and have a different perspective in terms of how to set up structures that were going to be productive for him. And then I started seeing a lot of things about ADHD in women, and I was like, that seems kind of familiar to me. And then my brother was diagnosed as well. So I went through the process just to, see, because I thought, I have struggled with self-confidence and negative self-talk and, a lot of blocks in terms of trying to get to the end of projects. So that kind of sparked the interest in me to see if there was something that maybe could be done to help. And yeah, sure enough, I was diagnosed with the focus and attention. So not so much the hyperactiveness or even the disorganization. I was never one to lose things or anything like that, but I certainly have had issues with listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think from what I understand from talking with my doctor about some of it is women who are diagnosed later in life. I mean, we've learned so many tools for whether it's being late or procrastinating or organizing. And for me, it would be organize. I'm a pretty organized person as well. But we've learned to work with some of those things, and then some things you just can't work with because there's no way around it. My diagnosis is very similar to yours. My daughter was diagnosed first, and then it took me a little bit of time. I've thought for a long time that something wasn't quite right, but for me, I'd been diagnosed in my 20s with anxiety disorder, which people always find it funny that I'm an anxious person, but I am. I've always had anxiety. I've always had panic attacks, but when I went to the doctor and talked to him about, asked him if he thought maybe I had ADHD, and we started running the tests and whatnot. Until I took the medication, I still didn't 100% believe it. And all of a sudden, when the medication worked, it was shocking, I think. And also, I think I'm still mourning a little and pissed off a lot.
Yeah, I know. It is emotional.
It is emotional. I've gone through some hard stuff, and I wonder if things would have been easier had I been diagnosed before. And, they just weren't diagnosing women. The medication has taken all the anxiousness away. It's taken all the negative talk away. It's taken so much of the, I ruminate, like I think constantly over and over and over again about conversations, and that's all gone.
Yeah.
So I've got way more focus, and I can work on, I can do my job, and I can enjoy things more, and yeah, so I'm a bit pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I had a different experience in that it wasn't so overtly obvious to me, the changes, but certainly some of the same ones, like the negative self-talk being eliminated has been like a life changer for me. The rumination to a certain extent too, especially when it comes to parenting, because that's where a lot of my anxiety came from. I didn't really have any issues with anxiety. I grew up in a very neurotic household, so I certainly inherited some of that for sure. But once I was a parent, and now I understand why my mom was neurotic, because, parenting is terrifying. It wasn't until after my son was born that I actually started to struggle with anxiety in a real way. And I have noticed since being medicated that I'm a lot more able to rationalize situations instead of awfulizing them, which is very helpful, especially as I navigate teenage years.
Yeah, right? I wonder all the stuff that I worried about when my kids were teenagers. I wonder, maybe I would have worried a little less. Maybe I would have been a little bit more. No, I wouldn't have.
You may not have come up with horrific situations for everything,
right?
But you still would have worried.
And the other thing is, this is fairly new for me, so I've not kind of gone through everything. I had a stressful situation last week, and I found, wow, I handled that so well. And I'm also not having, I can be a very emotional person, and I'm just okay. Like I'm not freaking out about stuff. I'm not playing things over and over in my mind. It's really wonderful. I feel like I have a whole new lease on life in some weird way at 56. And so, I know you had said to me a couple weeks ago, don't look back. Like and my son did as well. Don't look at all the stuff that you think you missed or you screwed up on or whatnot. Instead, I got to look forward and and kind of look at some of this. They talk about ADHD as being a superpower. So I have to figure out, how that works for me. And already, listen, I'm getting stuff done. I'm finishing up some projects. It's not taking me all day to do my work. I'm finding there's more time in my day. I feel a little bit weird because there's more time in my day. I'm like, how, all of a sudden I've got all these hours, and I'm like, where?
Yeah, it's interesting to be when you become a little bit more efficient and then almost like feel guilty when you have a little bit more downtime. But
yeah,
I mean, that guilt lasted a very short time for me. Like, this is great.
Well, it is great. It's really cool. Like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, and anyway, the diagnosis is fantastic. I don't want to make it sound like it's bad. It's so fantastic, and I'm so pleased to have the diagnosis. Looking to relax and rejuvenate? Treat yourself at Bello Day Spa. Located in the heart of Bedford West, from luxurious facials and brow services to soothing massages, waxing, and perfect manis, pedis, their team has you covered. Bello Day Spa isn't just a place for pampering. Their friendly staff will help you find the perfect skincare products from their wide selection of premium lines. Ready to refresh your routine? Book your appointment today and discover why Bello Day Spa is your neighborhood go-to spot for relaxation and self-care. Bello Day Spa, your local relaxation retreat. Yeah, but it's been a bit of a shocking experience. It's very new
and
still.
It's interesting, too, because there was a lot of crossover between ADHD and imposter syndrome, which is why we're talking about this today, because, a lot of the symptoms of ADHD can fuel feelings of feeling like you're a fraud or feeling like you're undeserving for your accomplishments and different things like that. So we thought it would be really interesting just to take some time and talk about how the two function together or how one feeds the other, for anyone out there who may be able to relate to some of those things.
Yeah.
One of the things that is pretty prominent in ADHD is executive function deficiencies. And I see this a lot in my son. I see it a little less in myself because, like you said, I think for a long time we just figured out coping mechanisms. And the disorganization was not really a huge issue for me, although I live and die by my paper planner. So maybe
too.
it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But executive function deficiencies, especially if we were schooled or brought up in a way where learning was very one-directional and there was only one way to learn, if you had trouble adapting to that type of learning, then there was a lot of opportunity to feel like there was something wrong with you, or that you were somehow not worthy or a fraud or trying to fit into a system that just wasn't built for you. So I think a lot of those feelings when executive function things come up can lead to feeling like we are imposters, that we're not cut out to do the thing we're meant to do. But it just might mean that we had to take a different path there as well. So I think that's one of the things that's very prominent.
Yeah. Another thing is difficulty accepting feedback. Positive feedback. And again, around imposter syndrome, I've always had trouble with that. Because you don't feel like you're deserving, or you feel like you've gone the wrong way around doing something, or you've taken a hard route, or it took you a long time to get there. And then so when somebody's giving you positive feedback, you're like, oh God, no, I don't deserve this because, it took me forever to do that task or whatnot. Or it took me forever to think about it. And then I did it last minute. And then suddenly somebody's saying, gosh, you did that so great. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't deserve that.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of people struggle with taking positive feedback regardless. And that's just, I think, part of how we grew up. But certainly if you don't feel like you're deserving of it, then it becomes very tricky to actually feel like that's coming from a real place and not just a place of, pity.
Yeah. Here's the one you and I have both struggled with. I've struggled with it my whole life, is the negative self-talk.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was ADHD.
I didn't either.
I just kind of thought that I just had low self-esteem.
Yeah, I did too. But I think that ADHD, going on for years and years and years of having ADHD, it causes that low self-esteem.
I mean, perhaps, but my mom told me as early as 2 and 3 that I wouldn't, I didn't want to talk to people. I was very withdrawn and unsure of myself with seemingly no real reasoning for that. A lot of times we have negative self-talk. It's because we've been in situations where something has happened and then we internalize that and bring it forward. I find it hard to believe at those young ages, that would have already existed in such a strong fashion.
Yeah, it was there for me, though. I remember even in grade 2, in Mrs. King's grade 2 class, I didn't know how to play with the other kids at recess as such because I was so shy. And then I was always afraid, for example, that they would think I was stupid or an idiot or if I would start to play with somebody, I would think, oh, they think I'm dumb or I'm saying the wrong thing or whatever. And it got to the point I remember that, so I would stand to the side. I would watch the kids play. And I remember Mrs. King, and it was terrible when I look back. She wouldn't let me go out at recess. And I remember she used to have me stay in and read a book or something like that because she said, well, you're not going to play with the other children anyway. I desperately wanted to play with the other children. But she would be like, you're not going to play with the other children anyway, and you're not nice, so you're going to stay in. I just didn't know because... And even when I have conversations as an adult, up until recently, up until really the medication, when I'm talking to somebody or when I'm telling a story, all I hear in my head while I'm trying to get the story out is, you're stupid, you're an idiot, she just looked out the window, she's boring, you're boring her, stop talking, Colleen, get on with the story, and I'm trying to tell a story, for God's sake, and there's all this other stuff coming at me, and it's me, it's my voice, me being a jerk to myself. It's constant negative self-talk. There's constant stuff in my head like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's very, very hard to navigate through.
Mm.
Mine was like not so much that, but after the fact, kind of thinking about things.
Rethinking and why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I wear that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had a problem breaking into groups or feeling comfortable with people in general for the most part. And I assume that's because I just don't inherently know how to interact with people that I don't know.
Yeah. Apparently it's ADHD.
I mean, I still don't,
Yeah.
but,
But we're learning. I mean, I feel like we're on such a path right now to discuss, like it's almost a rediscovery.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too, because for a lot of women, and perimenopause brings on the symptoms of ADHD. And I think that's also why I kind of noticed it a little bit more as I navigate that journey too. Like everything is sort of amplified to the point where it's impossible to ignore.
It is impossible to ignore. I mean, and I'm with you. I think menopause kind of brought some of it on with me as well. And even the pandemic and being on my own a lot. And now that work is ramping up for me, and as I started getting more clients, all of a sudden I was like, I was just getting overwhelmed and freaking out and too much on the go. And then I just happened to say to the doctor one day, do you think I have ADHD? And it blew it all up, It's like, oh, crap. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a long time, though. So delayed or abandoned goals is another thing, often rooted in past letdowns and contributes to the risk of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think not being able to get to the finish line is a big one. And if that happens enough, you can certainly feel like you're an imposter because you can't seem to accomplish anything. And a big thing about ADHD is hyperfixation and really focusing on something for a long time and then dropping it and never engaging with it again. Sometimes never getting to that finish line of the project. Like, I have countless bags of craft things that I've done for, months incessantly and then never touched again. And I just thought that was, like my dad always did that. My brother did that. Well, yeah. I mean, we all did that. We were just, and my son does it too, where you kind of like fixate on something for so long and maybe never get it to the end because once the challenge is gone, it's just not interesting anymore. And I think that also can contribute to furthering imposter syndrome if you feel like, well, I can't finish anything.
Can't finish
anyway.
anything. Yeah, I was the same. It was a go, 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 stop. And then when it was stop, I was done.
Yeah, forever.
And forever. Yeah, and so I'm like you, all these different unfinished projects. So you feel like you can never finish anything, or sometimes you're like, I'm not even going to start it because I'm not going to finish it. So what's the point?
Or it takes longer than you thought.
Yeah. One of the ways to combat imposter syndrome is to actually listen to how awesome the people in your life think you are. If you're looking for the perfect gift for a loved one, where you can tell them all of the things that make them special, visit my Drawbridge Creative Etsy shop and purchase a Things We Love About You custom poster. With several styles to choose from, it's a fabulous gift for any milestone birthday, anniversary, retirement, or just because.
But we were talking about this with somebody else too in another conversation about these like timelines that we self-inflict and then hold ourselves to. Like it's, somehow this written in stone that we need to have things done by a certain time, but we're the ones who have set the timeline.
Yeah, these fake timelines. Yeah.
That's exhausting.
It is exhausting. Missed deadlines and procrastination. So I'm not so much of a person that misses deadlines. But procrastination is my worst. I'm awful. I'm horrible at procrastinating. I'll procrastinate right up until 10 minutes before something's due and then pound it out.
Yeah, I can't live like that.
Awful.
I am very rarely miss deadlines. Also not a huge procrastinator, but because procrastination gives me anxiety because I also have extreme control issues. So I need to know that I'll be able to finish something. So I don't procrastinate a ton if it's important. If it's something silly like, taking out the garbage, then I'll probably wait until the absolute last second to do that. But from a project standpoint, I will back timeline things. So if I know a due date is this day, then I will I will back and track what what steps I need to be at in order to meet
Yeah,
that.
you're very organized that way. I think that that's maybe one of the skills that you really focused on, like that you really worked on for yourself. I procrastinate, but not only do I procrastinate, I'm thinking of it constantly. So if I have something to do, I had this logo to do for somebody recently, and I woke up every single morning thinking today is going to be the day. I'm going to get it done today. I'm going to get it done every single day. I spent time thinking, and do you think I could get it done? First thing I did when I was medicated, had the logo done, had it done within 2 hours or something, passed it off to her, and said, there you go. Like, it was, but I'd been weeks and weeks and weeks with that project and just couldn't get going with it. And then that causes the imposter syndrome, because then you're like, this person thinks I'm, really good at this logo design or graphic design, but obviously I'm not. I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm screwing up. I'm, letting people down. And other people think you're so great. And then I feel like a loser. Yeah.
I think sometimes there's a block that comes up. For me, anyway, there was something that I was really trying to work on that I've actually been able to crack through since being medicated. That had been kind of an idea in my mind, and either I didn't have the confidence to go for it, or I just couldn't see the way to it. I just couldn't see the way to it. I knew it was there, but I could not get there. And for a long time, I just figured, that's not for me. That's not something I should be doing. It's not, who am I to even think about something like that? So I think when some of those barriers are lifted, it becomes a lot easier to see the end goal. But when you're struggling through it, it can feel a lot like you're not in the right place. You're not doing the right thing.
You're not doing the right thing. Yeah. 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 It's really, they're ADHD and imposter syndrome really tie together. So unbelievable. Like when I sit back and look at it all, it's wild.
Well, I think when you're trying to work in a system that wasn't really built for the way that you think or learn, it's impossible not to feel like an imposter. Honestly, I think it's changed now. There's a lot more awareness around it. I think, even in my son's schooling, he has, I think they call them adaptation plans, or where they have different processes or programs for the way that he learns. And that's really important, because that gives kids confidence to know that it's not about them being able to do the work. It's about having the right systems in place to do it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think there needs to be so much more work done for that, because there's a lot more kids that are dealing with all kinds of these issues through schooling, and it's not just one way to
I
teach
think we're
kids.
very much learning that there are different learning structures and different learning styles, and I think educators are being educated in a different way. So I think we'll see a real shift in that.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God it's long overdue. Overwhelm with multitasking is another issue. I can get very, very overwhelmed. And then it causes stress,
Yeah, I think multitasking is a delicate science. Sometimes I'm really good at it. Sometimes I really struggle.
Same, yeah.
But I think that's another thing too. Inconsistency is huge. Like inconsistency and being able to, some days if you're on and you can plow through, in 3 hours and do a week's worth of work. And other days it may be that you sit on the same thing for a full day that would have normally taken you 5 minutes. And even medicated, it's sometimes hard to know what flow state you're going to get in or out of.
But I think the difference is that having the diagnosis, you can go, it's not a good day for me to be doing this stuff, so put it aside and maybe I'll have a more self-care day, or, so being a little bit more aware of what's going on makes it easier.
Yeah, I think you can play to your strengths, certainly that way. I used to do that a lot, even just with hormones and cycling and understanding when I was at my best. And now I do that in terms of my medications schedule, because typically around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, things start to fall off the page entirely in terms of executive function and things like that. So if I still have things to do, I will go through my week and look for the lower things that don't take as much brain function for me.
Yeah, that's great.
And use that time to maybe do some brainstorming or inspiration research instead of the hard, heavy lifting that I try to do in the mornings.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. It's really lovely to not, it used to take me all day long to work. like from 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever until 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. But now I'm working in the morning and I'm getting my work done. And it's quite glorious. But I'm with you in the afternoon, though. I'm kind of crashing. So,
yeah, I think if we can understand how to work to our strengths, then it just gives us confidence going forward, which is, imposter syndrome is largely fueled by low self-esteem or lack of confidence. So I think the two do play hand in hand so well, but mostly it's just because we don't understand what's causing those issues. And when you don't understand what's causing those issues, you're obviously going to think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. And I think some of the things that are misconceptions around ADHD that then fuel that imposter syndrome feeling is that, you think ADHD is just a childhood disorder. Far from it, and that was a little bit of a surprise to me as well. But I was just thinking that's a kid thing. People with ADHD just need to try harder. And I did that a long time. I kept thinking but in my mind, I thought it was my anxiety and stuff. I was constantly fighting against that anxiety, thinking I just have to work a little bit harder and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Not knowing I was up against something completely different.
Well, and I see that in my son all the time, too. He really, unless he's in the moment, you could ask him to do something 25 times, and he's just not going to register it. So that was a huge learning curve for me, too, even in how to figure out systems that were going to work for him, because I would just get frustrated. Like, why can't you listen? Why can't you just do this simple instruction that I've given to you 25 times?
Yeah.
And then I had read something that you need to touch their shoulder or their leg or something when you tell them something. And I started doing that. And he was like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Why are you being so weird? It didn't work.
It didn't work.
If you're wondering, it didn't work.
Serving up hot brews, refreshing cold drinks, lots of fresh baked goodies, and delicious lunch options. Visit the Mellow Mug in the heart of Larry Utech for dine-in, takeout, or drive-through service. Their spacious cafe offers a casual and inviting vibe that's perfect for everything from enjoying a good book, hanging with friends, or meeting a colleague. The Mellow Mug is your neighborhood spot for great coffee and delicious eats and sweets. ADHD only affects attention. That's so wrong. I think some of the H part or the hyperactivity part, for a young boy in primary or something that might be running around a classroom. For me, it's the chaos that was going on in my brain, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about attention. It was, ADHD symptoms are the same for everybody. They're not. You and I both have very different symptoms.
Yes.
Some are the same.
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap. And I
yeah.
even see that with my son, too. Like, it's very, very different in the way that it presents. Now, my husband might argue that it's the same.
Yeah.
But just different strengths or different challenges. Even my brother, who was recently diagnosed, it's just a completely different way that it has shown up for us.
Yeah. My daughter and I are very similar. And she's been after me for years to get diagnosed. And when I called her and said, I just got the diagnosis, and and then when I called her after I took the medication, I'm like, oh, Megan, the medication worked. And she's like, no shit, Sherlock. And she's like, finally, I'm so sick and tired of, when you have different issues or when something's going on and you're telling me about them. And I'm just thinking, you have ADHD, Mom.
Yeah.
Anyway, sometimes it takes our kids to.
Listen, I learn things every day.
Here's the other thing. Success disproves ADHD. We're both successful women.
I mean, that's where imposter syndrome really comes into play, because most successful people who suffer from imposter syndrome don't believe it.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how many achievements or accomplishments or accolades you get, because you just inherently don't believe that you're worthy of that, or that, they're real, or that it's inflated.
And then there's some talk around people with ADHD are just looking for an excuse.
Yeah. And I think because it's become so mainstream, and I even feel kind of embarrassed to talk about it to a certain extent, because it feels like I've just jumped on a bandwagon. And maybe I have, I don't know, but the bandwagon is really helping my brain.
and I said that to the doctor as well. I said, everybody's talking about it on TikTok, on Instagram. That seems to be such a hot topic right now, is this ADHD stuff. And I said, so I kind of feel, do I have ADHD, or am I just trying to be trendy with this whole ADHD thing? And he said, sometimes if somebody's procrastinating, he said, you can have procrastination without ADHD. You can be a big procrastinator, but somebody might say, oh, that's just my ADHD acting up, just being a little bit funny or silly or whatnot. So it kind of waters down the diagnosis for some people that really do have ADHD. The issue is when you have all of the symptoms for all of the different things that are going on in an ADHD brain. You don't just have one thing. You're not just disorganized. You're not just procrastinating. You have all of them. Now you have ADHD. And when you take the medication and it does work, then it's like, oh, wow. So I wasn't looking for an excuse, but I was definitely trying to figure out why I wasn't more successful, why I couldn't get stuff done, why I didn't feel right, why I was overwhelmed. So I was looking for that. And then once I started on the medication and then everything else started working and falling into place, I was like, oh, crap. This is great. Now maybe, now that's my superpower, because watch me shine now.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
now
I
that
think
I can focus.
I know there's certainly something to be said for mourning past losses, but also you could have gone on forever and not known.
Right.
So, looking forward to the future is the most that we can do.
Yeah.
One of the major differences between ADHD and imposter syndrome is that imposter syndrome is typically cyclical. So you weave in and out of imposter syndrome depending on a number of things, which we talked about in our opening episode, or triggers that come up. But ADHD symptoms are always there, and they may fluctuate in different environments, but they're always there. So that's sort of how you can determine the difference between the two. Certainly, I think that the cycles of imposter syndrome are inflated if you have ADHD, because you have all these other things that are in your mind that are backing up all that, the imposter syndrome messaging that's coming through. So I think, imposter syndrome and ADHD, not the greatest combo, probably, especially if you're really struggling with something. But understanding that could be something that fuels a little bit more, I think is helpful.
Yeah. We started this podcast, this is our third season. So, a couple of years ago of you and I sitting down and because I was struggling with something and we reached in to say, you've got imposter syndrome. And then next thing you know, we were like, oh, that would be a really good topic for a podcast. And I look at where we are now, and I think that the open dialogue that you and I have had for the last while and our friendship has allowed me to see that things weren't working for me, and I appreciate the support you've given me and the friendship through that, because, when I was having a down day or when I would be down on myself, you were there to lift me up or let me see it in another way. And I think all of that formed a path for me to eventually ask the doctor if things were not right in my brain.
I feel the same way about you in our friendship, because it can be really easy to get in your own head about things, especially in the industry that we're in. So it's very helpful to have another perspective to be like, it's actually not like that, and this is why. So I think the friendship has been mutually beneficial for us to kind of start to really carve out who it is we are and who we want to be. And I'm very thankful for that. And the podcast has also been a vehicle for that for so many people, to be able to come on and talk about their own experiences with self-doubt and how to navigate through that or not, how to sit through it and just be with it. So, I think we're all on a path, and, it's just one of the turns of the curves.
Yeah. Yeah. Life's just going to keep on getting more interesting and more fun and more adventures. And so anyway, if you're out there, if you're listening to us right now and you're like, wait now, yes, I have imposter syndrome, but I've got all this other stuff that Colleen and Alix are talking about as well, open the conversation and get tested. Or
it's worth investigating for sure.
Yeah, it can. And we're not saying that everybody needs to be medicated either. Medication is working for me. Lots of people out there are navigating it without the medication.
Yeah.
But listen, I think that, I feel like I have a new lease on life, but a lot of a lot of the anxiety and impostery feelings I've had through the years, the ADHD has not helped in any way. And yeah, so now it's moving forward.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to examine how the two play together. Yeah, but we'd love to hear from you too. So if you're having experiences, let us know. We'd love to hear about it.
Let's chit chat in the comments and jump on and let's chit chat in the comments and rate us and do all that fun stuff.
All the good stuff.
Do all the good stuff and share. I think these conversations are so important to have because there might be somebody out there thinking I'm a mess, I'm a shit show, and maybe there's something going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look how efficient we were getting through all these topics today.
Right?
Like, who would have thunk it?
Who knew? We're so good. Thank you. We'll see you next
Tuesday.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Imposter Sisters. Please remember, we're not doctors or mental health experts. If you're looking for mental health guidance, please see our show notes for local resources. Until next time, keep your head high, and we will see you next Tuesday.